Do you want to hear a story, Tibbers? Okay. Once upon a time, there was a girl that lived in the woods. She had a mommy and a daddy that loved her very much. Mommy had really cool powers. Her hands lit up with all kinds of colors, and she could make anything burn. Daddy said she was a witch. It was so cool, Tibbers, that the girl wanted to be a witch too when she grew up. She even made the girl a friend. He was small and soft and always with her. The girl was very happy with her mommy and daddy. But one day Mommy left, and she didn't come back. But it was okay, because the girl had the bestest and cuddliest friend ever. And Daddy was still there too. But then, this lady moved in with Daddy. She didn't like the girl. She always thought the girl wanted to hurt her. She even told Daddy that the girl was a monster. When she heard that, the girl ran to her room and cried. But then, while she was crying, her room lit on fire. Things started falling from the ceiling, and she was too scared to move. Daddy came rushing in to save the girl. He picked her up and tried to run, but the ceiling was gonna fall on him. So he threw the girl, and the girl hit something hard and went to sleep. When she woke up, everything was burned down, and the lady was crying. When she saw the girl, she got really mad. She yelled at the girl and took her best friend. The girl tried to stop the lady, but she couldn't. Then, the girl screamed as loud as she could. And her best friend grew. He grew so big and stopped her from hurting the girl. The girl was a witch too, Tibbers. And now, she and her friend live together in the woods. They love each other and play every day. And if someone tries to take her friend away,
Happy Halloween, my people! That is, if I got this video out on time. It is the month of the spooks, and what better way to celebrate my favorite holiday than to make a Halloween video about something truly frightening. Children. I'm just kidding, of course, but we are talking about a child today. Annie, the Dark Child. Ooh, the Dark Child. Spooky. Nah, but the only thing scary about this girl is the 4th bar underneath her health. Hello? Surprisingly though, Annie's lore fits with a lot of the spooky themes of Halloween. Daughter of a witch, demonic teddy bear that comes to life, wandering the woods alone, murderous rage. How can I not make a Halloween video examining this champion? I can't wait to explain to you all how terrifying this little girl is. Or at least that's what I thought, until I actually researched her lore and determined that she did nothing wrong. She has this title of the Dark Child that makes you think of a twisted and murderous kid, but that's nothing close to what Annie is. Don't get me wrong, her lore does state that she goes around killing the families that take her in thinking she's just a normal homeless child, but there's so much more to this lore that explains this behavior, and I'm here to defend this poor child because she literally has no one. So join me as I try to explain how Annie is just a regular child. Let's start with her anger. One of Annie's defining traits is her temper. She's stated in her lore to have a fiery temper that left her new stepmother understandably uneasy. But Annie's temper is just as understandable for one simple reason: her mother. Annie's mother left one day without ever coming back. It is unknown whether this was out of choice or a terrible accident. Regardless, an absent parent is enough to cause a bunch of emotions to stir inside a child, anger being one of them. At this point in the lore, Annie had no idea what happened to her mother. She just left and never came back. This would cause Annie to feel insecure about the relationship between her and her mother. She could develop doubts as to whether or not her mother truly loved her, or she could begin to blame herself for her mother's absence. These insecurities often lead to expressions of anger. Annie had hopes of her mother returning one day, and she waited, sitting in her mother's rocking chair, alone. It's understandable that Annie would end up developing some unresolved hostility. It doesn't necessarily have to be towards her mother, but just towards her unfair circumstance. It would be a long process requiring lots of patience for Annie to eventually warm up to someone new, and this leads to another issue that helps explain Annie's behavior: her new family dynamic. There are several challenges that come with being in a step-family at a young age. Many step-parents struggle to transition into the role of a new parent for this child that hasn't really known them. And there are also expectations within the child of not only the step-parent, but also their biological parent. They are going to expect their biological parent to be the one to give them the warmth, support, and healthy discipline because that's what they're used to. That's literally all they know. A step-parent can't really just expect the child to accept them as an actual parent very easily, especially if it's early into the relationship. And you can see the struggle in the family dynamic within Annie's origin story. Annie only really feels comfortable with her father. He's very supportive of her and is quick to defend her from Liana. This makes Annie feel safe around her father. She may acknowledge that Liana is an adult trying to take care of her, but Annie doesn't recognize her as a mother figure. And how could she when Liana shows clear favoritism for her own daughter, something that's not uncommon within step-families? She finds Daisy crying and the first thing she does is immediately blame Annie as if she wanted to hurt Daisy. But of course, her father recognizes that this was most likely an accident, something that I don't think Liana bothered to consider, and thus he comes to the defense of Annie.
What did you do?
She took Tibbers.
What is wrong with you?
It was an accident.
Daisy started it.
Oh, did she now? Well, I'm sure she didn't mean to. You'll be playing together before you know it, okay?
Daisy passes away from a tragic accident, an accident that Annie tried her hardest to prevent, and she ends up blaming Annie for the loss. From what we can see, Liana has shown nothing but disdain towards Annie.
You can't blame Annie. She's still our daughter.
No. Your daughter's a monster.
Can you imagine being called a monster by your stepmother after trying your hardest to save her daughter's life? What has Annie really done to deserve this? Where does this hostility towards her come from? Is it the drawings that she found? In the Origins video, Liana finds several crayon drawings made by Annie, and these are the most telling of Annie's true feelings about her family's situation. So art therapy is an actual technique used by child therapists to get a better understanding of the inner feelings of a child. It's pretty difficult to make a child feel comfortable talking with a stranger. So one way to get past this barrier and to establish some sort of communication is to include play within the sessions. The point of these play sessions is to look for non-verbal communication, meaning a child who is engaged in play will probably project their inner feelings onto the activity itself. So in the case of art, a child may choose to create drawings that reflect things going on in their actual life, such as fights that they have seen between their parents, or maybe some hostility that they hold towards something or someone, or maybe expressing feelings of sadness over the loss of someone. A child therapist will be trained to be able to spot these moments during play in order to get a better understanding of what the source of the child's troubles may be. Now, I am not trained to do this, but I don't know anyone that is, so I'm your next best option. We can see that Annie enjoys expressing herself through these crayon drawings. And I don't really think it takes a psychologist to understand that she's drawing her current family situation. We see Tibbers was a gift from Annie's mother. We see that the three of them, counting Tibbers, loved to play together. We see that Annie eventually recognized that her mother is most likely dead. But this drawing is the most telling of all. A drawing of Annie, her father, her mother, and Tibbers, all together with Annie and Tibbers providing fire. Meanwhile, Leanna and Daisy are outside of Annie's circle, with Daisy being visibly sad and Leanna expressionless, with all of them surrounded by scratches of red crayon. Again, I am no expert, so I don't want to try to interpret things like why Annie and Tibbers are surrounded with flames, besides the obvious reason, or why Leanna has no face, but I think I can at the very least say that Annie is expressing her desire to have her original family back. The scratches of red could be an expression of her anger for not having her real mother back, and having to see these strangers live in the same home her mother lived in. I'm pretty confident about that part of my interpretation. But basically, we can see that, despite the good times Daisy and Annie have together, she is not enjoying her current family situation, and can only really rely on her father and Tibbers for the same warmth that she was used to. This is normal for a child who has experienced the loss of her mother to feel. Leanna should not have given Annie that cold stare after looking at this drawing. You cannot expect this child to just love and accept you as her new mother just because you got with her dad. But no, you're too busy focusing on Daisy to realize that Annie is also a fucking child. She's not a monster trying to kill you. She's grieving her dead mother. And that brings us to Annie's most sacred object, Tibbers. A doll infused with a magical essence that transforms into a gigantic flaming bear. A beast first created from Annie's desperation. A beast that officially made her an orphan. It is this beast that now protects Annie as she wanders the wilderness alone. And the reason why she chooses to is because the only other adult that she was exposed to outside of her biological family thought that she was a monster. With her dad gone, why would she feel any safer in the town full of other adults that could be just like Leanna? Occasionally, she gives into her self-preservation and tries to connect with a family that is willing to take her in and feed her thanks to her innocent appearance. However, this often results in more victims of Annie's temper as they foolishly try to take Tibbers from her. Despite the murderous bear and the fire powers that she has no issues releasing on anyone, I'd still argue that she's responding to her environment like any other child would. The only difference is that she has powers. Annie is a child with no one to guide her, no one to show her how to use her powers, and no one to teach her about the consequences of death. Tibbers is the final connection to her real family in the world. It is understandable that she would freak out at the idea of losing Tibbers, even if it's meant to be a temporary punishment by those who don't know better. She used to have her father as a source of support and healthy discipline, but not anymore. And do you think a child would just easily listen to another adult she has no connection to? What we have here is a child whose only connection to the family she loves is her teddy bear, Tibbers, and is being threatened by someone else to have that connection taken away. To a child, especially Annie, that is a straight up threat to their life. And Annie, not being properly taught the severity of her powers or the consequences of death, is going to defend herself in the only way she knows how. Honestly, she's responding to these situations like any other child would. The only difference is that she was practically born with a nuclear arsenal. Honestly, the way that it's written, her lore makes her sound like she's actively trying to go to families to leech off them, but I don't think that'd be the case. I believe Annie is just a kid who has amazing powers and doesn't know any better. She doesn't have her father to tell her when it's okay to use them, and she isn't going to feel a similar emotional connection with anyone else. It's just not that simple to enter a child's life and declare yourself their parent while also having them accept you. So Annie is just left on her own. She's still an ordinary kid that would love to have someone in their life they can play with, but at the same time, she has no reason to hold back if she feels threatened. If anything, the Dark Child would be a moniker given to her by other people who don't understand her. People like Liana, who just assume that she's a monster and fail to see the most obvious thing, that she's just a child, alone in this world.